Starting my speech in three, two, one. The gradual imprisonment of animals disrupts their natural order, and it assumes the higher form of authority when it forces these animals to be subservient. It's an act we shall not stand for, proud to propose. I'm going to be forwarding two arguments in this speech today. Firstly, on the moral framework, and secondly, on why the natural order is important to be preserved. But before that, a few pieces of setup. So what does domestication actually look like? We think that it looks like generations and centuries down the line, continuing to house and live alongside these animals, right? It looks like them targeting specific species, for example, cats and dogs. And it looks like way back then, it was like cavemen targeting wolves to befriend them, and now they domesticated them into dogs, right? So it looks like the gradual imprisonment of these lives and the freedom of these animals, and this is what we oppose, right? It looks like them keeping and trapping them in their households of humans, right? So note that animals do have rights to an extent in status quo, right? Because we do have organizations that seek to protect them, and we condemn those that abuse and exploit them, right? Because we wish for these animals to be in better living conditions, right? And we attach emotional value to these animals. So what's our stance in this debate? We don't just believe that the domestication of animals currently is bad, but we believe it's always been bad. So which is to say, from the very moment we took animals out of their natural habitats and enslaved them in our homes, we have committed an immoral act. And we oppose the deliberate shift of the natural order, where humans specifically incarcerate and cage the freedom of these animals generationally. So understand that this is a morality motion, right? We don't have to prove that people will follow this code of conduct. We just simply believe that it's immoral, right? While OP has to defend all entailing forms of domestication. So first argument on the moral framework then. So how do we determine what is moral? We're going to bring you three reasons here. Firstly, the ability to consent. Secondly, autonomy. And lastly, something about the commodification of living animals. So first lay then on the ability to consent, right? We tell you that cats and dogs and other animals that are often domesticated don't have the ability to consent, and they cannot opt into being domesticated. They can't consent because their psychological workings have been rewritten after years of domestication, right? After being subjugated to human control, right? They had no capacity to fight back from the beginning, right? Due to the power asymmetry between animals and humans, right? There was always a risk of them being harmed or abused if they chose to fight back. And thirdly, humans often left them no choice, right? Because humans like destroyed their habitats from the very beginning, right? So insofar as these animals cannot consent, we think we ought to err on the side of caution and let them remain in their natural habitat from the very beginning, right? The way they have been living for the longest times. This is the most appropriate response because you're able to preserve their natural order and the way that ecosystems have been evolved and how natural selection naturally occurs, right? Because recognize that humans probably don't have the best interests of animals at heart. They most probably have their own interests at heart, and often these looks like satisfying their own personal needs, or maybe even things like monetary profit, right? So second layer then on autonomy. We think when you are domesticated, your owners control whatever you do, and oftentimes due to the previously said power asymmetry and the inability to speak up for yourself and communicate what you want, this often looks like these animals having to live in a controlled environment, right? Because you live in your owner's house where they control everything inside, what you can do, what you cannot do, is everything is up to your owner's control, right? Secondly, you often have a dependency on your owners because you have to rely on them for everything. For example, food, water, toys, and even entertainment, right? You create a reliance on these humans and you prevent them from exercising their autonomy, right? And thirdly, there's a lack of mobility for these individuals because they oftentimes have to follow the orders of their owners, and they're mostly leashed when they go outside, if they're even able to go outside, probably like once a week going to the park, right? What the comparative is, absent of domestication, these animals would continue to live in their natural habitat, allowing them to like roam free if they want to, or allowing them to just interact with their fellow cats and dogs, just talk to them, have fun, and just interact with their fellow peers, right? So right. Lastly, then about the commodification of living animals. Because we posit to you what happens when you trade the livelihoods of animals on monetary terms. And this is what usually happens in status quo, right? So what happens is that there's oftentimes increased breeding between dogs and cats when breeders continuously try to meet the demand for these pets and these domesticated animals, right? We think oftentimes bad breeds or not as desirable by consumers are often discarded by like simply the choice of humans, right? And these animals cannot self-determine who survives, and they are rather discriminated upon by their color of their fur or just like their physical characteristics, right? And oftentimes these animals are subjected to poor treatment before even entering the houses of these owners, because oftentimes in these breeding centers, breeding facilities, they are subjected to things like confinement, overcrowding, and other forms of like cruelty just to maximize efficiency and profitability, right? Before I move on to my second, I'll take a point. Three, two, one. no engagement, right? So next, then why is the natural order important to be
Okay, why?
preserved? Okay, yeah.
So is their autonomy even beneficial when at the end of the day they're still subjected to being a prey in the wild compared to like the good living environment when they're breeding?
Yeah, they are a prey in the wild, but they still can exercise their bodily autonomy, right? And we think when they have been living in the wild for so long, they're able to develop survival mechanisms to protect themselves from other prey. And it doesn't mean just because there's a prey, they suddenly lose all sense of bodily autonomy and the right to self-determine, right? So why is so back to my second argument then on why the natural order is important to be preserved. We think it's important not to disrupt natural order because in the past, without domestication, these animals will be living freely in the wild and just living to their best lives, right? The natural living conditions of these animals were largely conducive to them because they had a greater ability to interact with the wild, they had a greater ability to roam freely, they had a greater ability to interact with fellow cats and dogs. We posit to you that humans are social creatures, right? We need a human interaction with other people to stay sane. And we think animals are no different, right? And this is something that's locked away on the side of opposition. So why is the natural order here important? Two reasons here. Animals are free and autonomous in nature. So what happens is domestication actively undercuts this and subjugates these animals to the rule of the humans that may not have their best interests in mind. And oftentimes, animals are denied the right to live the life they want to live, denied the right to live the life they intend to live, and instead they live the life that humans intend for them. I think secondly, animals have the right to self-determine, right? But when they are becoming domesticated, human breeders now choose which species lives and which species dies, right? In the past, you would just give each animal, like when they're in the wild, they had a fair chance to fight for themselves through methods of natural selection, right? But what happens through domestication? You introduce unnatural selection based on arbitrary human aesthetic preferences. And this isn't the survival of the fittest anymore. It's rather the survival of those decided by humans, right? I think more why is self-determination important? I think insofar as you condemn things like colonialism and slavery for the reason that they deny the right of the people to consent and decide how they live, we don't see why this shouldn't apply to animals, given that we also do currently enshrine animal rights in status quo, right? I think we believe that the removal of this autonomy for arbitrary reasons, that just to satisfy your human needs and desires, just to satisfy your need to have a companion, or just to satisfy your need to not be lonely, right? It's immoral because these animals actively now serve no other purpose just to feed into our own happiness and our own selfish ego, right? I think given that there are many other things that can give humans happiness, and there are other alternatives in place in status quo that can bring you rather the same level of fulfillment and same level of happiness, we ought not to do this at the expense of the happiness of these animals. We ought not to do this at the expense of the autonomy of these animals, right? We don't see why you should compromise the autonomy and the freedom of animals for this, right? We think this is an inherently immoral act, and there is no reason why this should be allowed to occur, right? So for all those reasons, proud to propose.
Thank you, PM, calling upon hello. Hello, whenever you're ready.
Give me a sec. Okay. Am I audible? Okay. Panel, for the government side to come up here and compare domestication to slavery, we on the opposition side understand that they don't even understand what domestication is at the very first place. So let me talk about, as your leader of opposition today, I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to be determining our burden for today, which is how domestication actually has benefited these animals throughout the entire throughout the entire course of humanity benefited them more than it has harmed them. And secondly, what is immorality in the first place? We tell you that immorality is when it harms another party. And we tell you that these animals at the very end of the day, they have had less harms put onto them, as these animals would have more harms put onto them in the life in the wild, in the life that proposition wants to put onto them, because we understand that humans sorry. So we understand that, okay, so what does domestication look like in the very first place, right? Realize that the domestication has always been a mutualistic relationship, and domestication has always been a relationship of two parties, right? PM said that they don't have the ability to consent. Well, you think that when they don't have the ability to consent, they also don't have the ability to feel the burden of being taken away, being bred or being taken away for generations and being put in house. We tell you that animals are not able to feel this burden, and the inherent feeling of animals, the only thing that they want to achieve actually is they want to live, is that they want to survive. It's survival. They will always choose survival over anything else, and that is how domestication happened in the first place, because these animals wanted to survive. Because these animals wanted to survive, and they inherently wanted to. Because these humans gave them food, these humans gave them shelter, they inherently decided, okay, these guys are cool, so I will also protect them. I will also protect them from other predators. Realize that these all from if they didn't see humans as beneficial, they would have eaten them already, they would have killed them already. But because there was a mutual relationship where they got something and we also got something, that is why humans continue to be with them, and wolves also continue to be with us. We tell you that the harms of abuse or whatever that they're going to talk about. The harms of abuse do not equate to the harms of domestication. And domestication has always been a mutual relationship. And we think that because inherently animals want to live and want to survive, we're not trapping them. They are not trapping them. We are not trapping them. They are genuinely just want to be with us because we can protect them and we can help them achieve that choice that they want, that choice of that they want, which is to survive. And their instinct of survival is purely their choice and their autonomy, right? But say that they are actually want to survive in the wild and stuff. We think that where I'll take before 6. That autonomy isn't good if you're going to watch these wolves go and die eventually, these sheep go and die eventually in the wild. We tell you that autonomy isn't good, and it isn't moral for you to watch that sheep go and die when you know that you could keep it in your house and make sure it survives to see another day, right? We tell you that in itself is immoral for you to leave these horses in the wild with their hooves absolutely long and untrimmed and uncared for. We tell you that these the natural order of animals sometimes works against them, and the natural state is actually something that can harm them without human intervention because of how nature works and how nature is so weird. We tell you that when humans can intervene and actually change them and actually fix them and actually change them and give them purpose in life, we tell you that that's a greater world. That's a more moral world where we can actually live in harmony than actually just leave. And it's immoral for you to just leave animals in the wild and then just where instead of actually working with them to get the things that you want, because regardless, humans are going to have to eat animals, right? Humans and animals are going to have to interact, as opposed to with a world without domestication, where all these interactions are just harmful, where all these interactions are you just shooting them dead because you want to eat them. We tell you that in our world, we tell you that in our world, a world with domestication, these animals and humans actually work together in order to get that goal, in order to be able to have that food in the very first place. And we tell you that in modern day, in status quo, that the research in animals is already that humans do care about animals, right? That humans do care about the things around them and the nature and the environment. So we tell you that the research in animals in the same industry that was maybe that tries to hurt them, it's also the exact same industry that is working in research and in science to help like give them better medication to help them feel less painless deaths when they are dying. That helps them feel less pain. That actually once them studies them psychologically, they study them mentally. They cater to their needs. They're making all sorts of like purina food that they want to give to these animals. Because we care about these animals and we want them to live good lives. And we tell you that that is inherently moral, especially to the human being, because we want to take care of something and we want to see them strive along with us instead of against us,
You're
right?
right.
So, sure.
How are animals able to consent into this relationship?
You said that animals cannot consent in the very first place, so I don't understand how you're suddenly going to POI me and say animals can consent. Animals, their very inherent instinct is to survive. If you see a cat in the wild, even your cat at home, if you suddenly touch a place that they don't like, they will literally because their inherent instinct is always first and foremost to survive, regardless of who is like in their house or whatever. We tell you that dogs and cats, that dogs literally see us as just like really weird looking dogs, and like cats also just see us as like weird furless cats with who are kind of stupid. Okay, so we tell you that that's why we believe that because these animals do always are always in. I actually don't know the time. I'm so sorry. If it's almost time, just somebody tell me. So we tell you that what does a world without domestication look like, right? So the age of domestication actually brought to us farming, right? Because we had dogs to help us herd these animals, and these animals, these herded animals wanted to be with us because we could give them food. So we tell you that without the existence of domestication, there would be no more farms, which would cause and would be chased around every day. And I'm sure if you were a sheep, rather than getting your neck mauled off by a tiger, you would rather live a nice fat life where you a nice life and eventually become euthanized at the end of the day, and you can with minimal pain, because like that's what all the vegans are fighting for these days, right? So if everybody's dad is now in the modern world, right, going out to hunt every day, we tell you that this is more harmful to animals and ecosystems in the very first place, because without domestication, there is no idea of you wanting to retain these animals, or you wanting to keep these animals. Domestication is the idea of human beings wanting to the idea of sorry no the idea of human sorry 6 minutes the idea of human beings wanting to take care of these animals. And so when you take away that domestication, when you take away the idea of taking care, already ate, oh my god, and you take care of these animals, who's going to take care of the poor little sheep, guys? Okay, that thank you. I'm so sorry for not timing myself. I totally forgot.
Right. Thank you, hello, for the speech calling upon DBM. Okay.
Hi, so my pronouns are he, him. I prefer POIs verbally. Am I visible and audible?
It's the rule.
I've never had a dog before, but I think that perhaps keeping a dog and feeding it at one specific point in time isn't inherently a bad thing. But when you look at generations down the line, when you look at the you shackle the imprisonment, the freedom of these specific animals, I think that is the greatest sin of all time, something which opposition could never fully confront with. Let me just be really clear about our stance. We oppose domestication and not other forms of farming, for example, breeding chickens for food, because it is not necessary. Domestication is not necessary in status quo, and in any way, it is only for our own luxury and pleasure. Farming for chickens is a necessary way to survive for food, and we believe that is part of the natural order in which we aim to preserve. From the top of this speech, two strategic observations. Firstly, notice how extremely uncharitable and inaccurate opposition was. Their characterization of animals is completely wrong. Like, please watch a documentary of David Attenborough. These animals have been specifically hardwired and evolved over time to be trained to survive in any biome, in any specific habitat. They're not some extinct animal that's about to die. Like, literally all of your characterization was similar to that of a dodo, and look at what it is now. Freaking extinct. Secondly, you are prioritizing the wrong specific actor. What opposition's entire case hinges upon was that if these specific domesticated animals are the main crux of the problem, if you see a sheep getting eaten by a lion, you should protect that sheep. But we think that's the wrong actor. Even if you can protect the most vulnerable, the sheer scale of which that the natural order exists and it is far more reliable. We want to protect the food chain. They want to protect a specific vulnerable actor. And the reason why scale exists over specific vulnerability, I will explain later. I want to dive into 2 grounds in this debate. Firstly, on the safety and well-being of these animals. Secondly, on the principle of consent and autonomy. Firstly, then, on the safety and well-being of animals. We told you from first that commodification of animals in status quo specifically leads to things like forced breeding specific breeds of animals or dogs that look to be, for example, prettier or fluffier. And you also neuter these specific breeds, which I I'm not going to go to the analogy to the point where I say if I were to neuter you, would you like it? But I think it's fair enough to say that these dogs are not meant to be neutered in their natural order. Their response was they're better off in status quo because they're being fed A5 Wagyu and premium sushi. I have 3 responses to this. Firstly, the evolution of natural order is precarious yet stable, and it overrides this in an entirely logical sense. What do I mean by this? The evolution of natural order is how animals react to stimulus in their natural environment. If they were to shift biomes, their bodies, their genetics would also shift. That means that over time, yes, while animals just form, a lot of them get preyed on. But as time forms, as the genetics slowly shift, as their physical characteristics slowly shift to be able to survive, they adapt to their current environment, meaning the point at which you take them from their domestication is the point at which they're most suited to their current environment because millions of years of evolution has made it so. Yes, it's precarious, which is why domestication takes out these animals and harms them even more. It is also stable if we were to leave it on their own because self-adaptation and self-management is what we think is key. Second response, humans are not a reliable actor. For example, not all of them are knowledgeable. You could feed your dog chocolate, and yes, although it's sweet, it's probably going to hurt their intestines or something. But beyond that, we also don't have the animal's best interest at heart. We have things like greed, we have things like self-interest, which we think exists over and supersedes over these specific actors of animals. Third response, even if in their best case that these animals are treated well, understand that in our case, firstly, these animals would have thrived nevertheless because they have already evolved with the same characterization that I've given you earlier. Even if they're still praise does not mean that they're somehow more vulnerable. It just means that they exist in another plane. And like what they said in The Lion King, right? The lion, once they die, the grass takes up their nutrients and the praise eat the grass, meaning that it's a circle of life. Secondly, for every 1 animal that is treated well in your world, 10 more suffer. What do I mean by this? Simply because one specific animal gets a good owner means that the 10 others have to suffer, has to go through getting neutered, has to go through breeding with other dogs that they possibly don't want to. Well, there is no form of consent. But regardless, treating them in harsh conditions is still immoral. And I think we can all say for sure that breeding the same dog 10 times is still going to hurt its own reproductive system and it's not going to be good for it. But let's weigh evolution versus this man-made safety. Which one do you weigh out more? And firstly, man-made safety weakens the specific physical characteristics and mental strength of these animals because these animals are so used to getting their stimulus, to getting their reward, which is candy or sweets, so instantly. This means that they no longer have to adapt to be able to catch food. They no longer have to hunt, which means that cats from like lions or tigers are no longer as strong as before. But secondly, in terms of evolution, it means that if any specific obstacles were to be present, these animals can easily react to it by changing their body. But since these specific domesticated animals have not yet evolved in a way that is beneficial, if any obstacles were to occur, like stray cats, they will most likely suffer. And the only reason why a lot of stray cats are still surviving is because we humans take pity on them and feed them in our mamak stalls. Second grounds on principle of consent and autonomy. We've told you from first that animals cannot consent because their psychological workings are rewritten. Secondly, we've also told you that autonomy does not exist because they have no choice. They are simply following generations of survival instinct. They claim that it's a survival instinct for animals to help humans, therefore it's moral. Exactly my point. I have two responses to this. Firstly, it is exactly the exploitation of innate survival instinct that we think is completely immoral. Take, for example, how animals are fine-tuned to respond to a stimulus, and if there is a reward present, then they're likely going to repeat actions for that stimulus to repeat again. For example, if you feed a wolf as a caveman last time, this wolf now recognizes that he no longer has to hunt for food, rather he can get it in an easy manner by begging towards these cavemen. This means that you're actively igniting their stimulus by giving them food, meaning that they can no longer actively engage in activities that lets them get food by themselves. You are exploiting the fact that they always have to react to a stimulus to get a reward, which means that their brain catalogs the specific context with which they get the reward and they try to repeat it. This is exactly how you exploit and hardwire these animals. But before I go on to my second response, yes, a POI.
If you define autonomy as a lack of choice, wouldn't you also take away their autonomy in the wild when they're forced to be finding food and surviving?
Let's clear this up. If you take away their lack of autonomy in the wild, right? This is because there is no choice. And if you want to talk about autonomy, they can choose where to go there, right? They have their own physical characteristics, fine tuned. And the reason this is so damaging is because humans are an actor that we can control. If they affect animals, then we can control that. But if the natural order affects these animals, it is something we cannot control because they are not an actor. Meaning we can specifically change how they respond to these humans, but we cannot to the natural order, like how we cannot change into like how we cannot respond to the natural order. If you want to go into the debate of whether or not humans have free will, I'm happy to do that, but not in this current scenario. But second response, the natural order is unfair, but sometimes it is unfair for all animals, and in that way, it is moral and it is fair. Take, for example, your own instance of a sheep being eaten by a lion. You want to take away that sheep, right? Let me ask you, what about that lion? What happens to it now? Would you rather the sheep taken away the safety, but now this lion starves? Or would you now this lion being well fed, but the sheep dies? This is something that is inherent in the natural order, and there's always something about sacrifice. And lastly, you claim that there's a mutual relationship and how it relates to consent. Value does not mean permission, right? If I give you a mansion over your current house, if I give you a new family who abides to your every rule and not your current family, you would probably say no because you love your current family. But the thing is, it's different. It's simply because that you do not consent to it, and that is what we want. We want freedom, we want truth, we want these animals to be able to choose. Thank you.
All right, thank you, DPM. Just a reminder to everyone that the judges will not be taking any notes beyond the 8 minute and 15-second mark. So you might as well just end your speech at that point. Calling upon the yellow. Okay.
First of all, I think we've already established that animals cannot really consent to like how they will live at the end of the day. But even if we were to fight about the idea of consent, right? We think that I think that my PM already told you that at the end of the day, these animals, what they want is to survive. What they want is to get food and just breed at the end of the day. Like that's the two things that they want out of their life. So we think that the idea of at the end of the day, our principle of survival is much more important to these animals than this whole consent thing that proposition side is trying to propagate. Because at the end of the day, right, when they live in this world, it's never fair to them anyway. Like they're still going to be killed, if not by humans, by some tiger. Like at the end of the day, humans are still going to shoot them up and kill them if we don't domesticate them. But the point in time in which we domesticate them, the point in time in which we provide them food and shelter, and we help them we kill them in a more humane way, we think that's more beneficial for these animals. And we think that because we cause less harm to these animals once we domesticate them, is the point in time where it is moral for us to domesticate them, but it's not something that harms these animals. We think that is where we take the principle in this debate. And secondly, they talked about how they want to maintain this natural order. Realize that in life, right, ever since like the 1800s, we've been evolving in ways that benefits us. We used to live in jungles, right? Okay, so if you want to maintain the natural order so much, we still be living there. So we evolve in ways that
Why?
benefits us. We think that evolution is more important, not just to humans, but also to animals. To the point in time where they look at this owner and they notice that they can live a more comfortable life, where they don't have to be fighting in these jungles to survive, is the point in time where they can also decide for themselves, where they can also practice bodily autonomy to survive in a way that's more comfortable and luxurious for them. So we also think that it's not something that's inherently harmful to these animals and instead beneficial for them. So that is the point in time where we take this moral part in this debate.
If animal safety and survival is so important, why don't we interfere in every circumstance where a predator hunts a prey?
Again, sorry?
If animal safety and survival is so important, why don't we interfere in every single circumstance where a predator hunts a prey?
Because at the end of the day, we're still going to, okay, at the end of the day, we're still going, I already told you, at the end of the day, animals are still going to die. Like, it's just like the different ways that they're going to die. It's not by humans, it's by other animals. If they're going to face predatory behavior, if they're a prey, right? That's just how life works, right? But we're telling you that the point in time where humans can intervene and make them die a more painful, a less painful death, and the point in time where you can euthanize them in a way that doesn't make them scream for 5 hours, we think that is when it's actually moral to actually domesticate these animals, to actually give them a place to live and things like that. So, and we also think that the domestication of animals is the only reason why we even care for these animals in the very first place. Because we think that humans are empathetic in nature, but before this, we only see them as our enemy, right? But when we domesticate them, is the point where we actually provide them like where we actually think of ways so that they can live more comfortably and just die less painfully. And fourthly, about how they're trying to say that sometimes the mutation of these animals happen, get fluffier dogs and things like that. We think that itself does not happen because of domestication. That happens simply because some humans are cruel. And we also think that there are mitigations in stopping this from happening. The point where we notice that these animals are actually living a painful life because they have a flat face and short legs is when there are other humans who intervene and try to stop this and not breed them even more so that they live more painfully. Okay, so we think that it's different when you keep these dogs at home and like breed them in the farm, right? But we think that in both worlds there are mitigations in order for them to live more comfortably and so that we don't hurt them on our own accords. So we think that even when we kill them, right, we want them to immediately die so that we don't face these animals actually just dying like that. Okay. Your point.
But is it not possible that on your side, domesticated animals will also face sickness and, for example, like chronic illnesses that also make them suffer for a very long time unless you suggest euthanization?
Yeah, but we think that we already told you, right? Like if you see like this dog crying every day, it's the point in time where you like, oh my god, this dog's sick, so I need to take them to the vet. Like we think that's already mitigative efforts that happens in status quo, right? So we think that it's kind of immoral for you to, it's kind of bad for like proposition side to just paint domestication, like the domestication the industry as like just like killing all animals and like abusing everyone. Because we think that domestication doesn't equate to abusing these animals in general. And we've already told you that there's already like not only like mitigation efforts, it's also like conservation efforts in which we're trying to ensure the survival of this breed. Of this species and stuff. So we think that at the end of the day, our on opposition side, we don't really care about like the natural order of life. If these animals are instead living a happier life in which they reach their goal of survival. And we've also told you that and we also tell you that natural order of life isn't that important at the end of the day when we all species in this world evolve to adapt to the current way of living, or if it benefits us in the long run. So we think that already takes down their whole point on that, like them mansplaining some symbiosis and stuff like that. So we think that we also think that like my PM stated, how these animals at the end of the day, they're still going to be exposed to predatory harms. So if you're a prey at the end of the day, you're still gonna die. But we think that humans can control, and it's something that only humans can help these animals to achieve at the end of the day. And we think that it's not something that's solely for human greed, right? We think that we've already told you that it's a mutual benefit. We've already told you that when I give you food, you protect my house. And we think that that's something that's not it's not something that totally is totally immoral to both parties. And we think that if it's mutual to both parties, we think that it's the point in time where it doesn't it is justified for us to do so. So yeah, go for op.
Thank you, Diallo, calling upon Kablet. Here.
Just check my audible and visible.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, just let me set up my timer. Hope you guys verbally. Okay, I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Just like the POI, my first speaker denied me from denying animals their right to freedom and subjugating them to domestication imposes slavery on them. It is slavery because you prevent them from having a choice, you prevent them from having a decision. And I don't think saying that slaves die in a better way is enough because they die in a better house or something is enough to justify it. I think it is principally immoral, and we have all been immoral for owning a cat. Sadly, I own a cat. Anyway, a few strategic observations from the side of government. Firstly, on opposition, they say that domestication is not abuse. This shows that they're just cherry-picking the case. There have been very clear cases where domestication is abuse, and we have given to you a whole host of analysis of why abuse is perpetuated when you commodify these things, when you have money incentives, when you discriminate against certain types of animals. More analysis in my speech later. But this just goes to show you that the harm of abuse is not only unique to our side, but it is symmetric. Animals can be abused when they are domesticated, and animals can be abused when they are in the wild. The difference that we told you is that when you are in the wild, the animals have a right to choose for themselves and fend for themselves, whereas when you are domesticated, the autonomy is placed solely on the humans, and you deny the animals of their right to choose. There are also so many logical holes in their case that has not been resolved yet, and third speaker has to do a lot of cleaning up to do. If not, their case cannot stand, because they have still not answered the question that I gave the idea to of my first speaker, which is that if safety of the animals was so important, would you intervene when a wolf is killing a cow or something? Would you give that wolf food, and would you put all animals in a zoo just because safety is so important? Insofar as that question is not answered, there is a very big logical hole in their case that has not been resolved. A few questions are answered in my speech. Firstly, what do animals want? Secondly, is safety of animals more important than freedom? And finally, why do we need to protect the natural order? Firstly then, what do animals want? The analysis that both sides agrees on is that animals can't consent. But what is the actual impact of not having consent? It means we have to weigh up if something is immoral or not. This is why we weigh that children, doing drugs and stuff before the age of 18 is immoral, because they cannot consent to it yet. But side opposition says that animals want to survive. I mean, sure, but this isn't always guaranteed. We cannot in all cases ensure that they achieve what they want by wanting to survive. But what happens when we domesticate them? We introduce another harm, which is that of undermining their autonomy. So maybe in opposition's best case, you are able to ensure the safety of a bit more animals, or maybe you give them a slightly better death because you invent euthanasia for them. But you also take away something else, which is freedom. So my first speaker told you it's better if we err on the side of caution and only undermine one right, which is safety, rather than undermine two, which is that of safety and freedom. Given that I think all these things are on a spectrum, and the fact that even if an animal gets hurt slightly, it also counts as an undermining of safety. When you forget to feed your cat for 3 days in a row, that is also an undermining of safety. I don't think they have given us a plausible metric which to weigh up if safety is protected when you domesticate the animals. They give us ideas like, oh, we can invent medicine for them. But at which point is the medicine enough to ensure their their safety. Insofar it is never enough. At the very least, on our side, we don't undermine their autonomy as well. And here I want to deal with their argumentation on having a better death, in the sense that these animals, they still die, but they die in better conditions. I don't think this still applies, because animals die at the end of the day, and at the very least, in the natural order, which is what the model we propose, or the counterprop that we propose, they are able to fight for themselves, fight with their own evolutionary instincts, and fight with how they were supposed to fight and how they've been built up to fight, to find out if they are the ones that should survive or not. Whereas on their side, you decide who dies, you decide who gets a better death, and we think it is unequal. Moving on then, is safety of animals more important than freedom of animals? They say that the animal's safety should be protected. But the problem with this is that if you really value this principle, then you have to intervene in all circumstances in which the safety of this animal is endangered. And since opposition oppose the natural order, we would have to go into jungles, take all animals and put them in zoos. If we cannot do that, then you cannot be moral on opposition's side. What does this mean? This means that the moral framework that opposition runs on is illogical and implausible. Insofar as we cannot put all animals in zoos, because that means that you would not be protecting the safety of all animals, then I don't think that their case can stand. At the very least, on our side, you can ensure the autonomy of all animals. All you have to do is to just let them free. My second speaker already explained to you that insofar as we humans have a right to eat, then we just kill some animals, or we just rear some animals to eat them. That is still within the bounds of the natural order and circle of life. But we don't disturb all the other animals that we disturbed otherwise. So furthermore, their case also makes things like harvesting animals for food also impossible, which is to say that the source of survival for tons of humans, which is eating meat, would be immoral on their side, because you are killing an animal for food. And what did we defend? We said, why should freedom be protected? We said, your right ends where mine begins. When I need to eat because I have a right to live, then I can eat a chicken and participate in the circle of life described in my second. But I don't have a right to entertainment or to enslave another animal for my own personal belongings or for my own personal benefits. My first speaker already explained how there are many other ways to achieve this, right? Through through other mediums of entertainment. They have not proven on opposition why the unique benefit animals can provide when they are domesticated is enough to justify domesticating them. They have only gone about one principle, which is that of safety. What is the impact of winning this clash on safety, on freedom being more important than safety then? We think the harm of ensuring freedom is worse, of the harm of limiting freedom is worse than the harm of endangering the safety of the animals, because animals are always endangered in the wild, but they always have freedom. So introducing domestication crucially undermines this and undermines their right to choose how they would want to live. Now, before I move on to the third clash, are there any POIs? 3, 2, 1. Seeing as there are none, our case stands uncontested. So why do we need to protect the natural order? A whole argumentation given by my first speaker that has gone ignored is that of commodification. The unique harm of intervening in this natural order is that you attach a value or monetary value onto the lives of these animals, which is to say that when you are domesticating these animals, you only choose certain animals to domesticate based on arbitrary metrics. Yeah, sure.
The reason why we can breed them is because these animals actually allow us to breed them. So doesn't that also give them like a form of consent or freedom into how they want to live?
Yeah, we already preempted this. I don't think mind controlling someone and then asking them to have sex counts as them agreeing to it. I think we've already explained to you why at the moment you took these animals out of the jungle and then forced them to work under the metrics you want them to work, under the metrics and behavioral mechanisms that humans want them to work, that was already immoral and that has already undermined their right to choose. Furthermore, I think you already explained that the right to consent doesn't exist in your second. I don't know why you still want to defend it here. So again, the unique harm of intervening in this natural order is commodification. So insofar as even in their best case, where they tried to fight on the practical benefits of ensuring these animals are protected, when you introduce commodification, you guarantee that some animals are not able to continue their species. That is to say, the dog or the cat that is of a slightly darker fur color, or the dog or the cat that has physical disabilities will not be protected because humans naturally want animals that are best. I mean, they could argue for some good people, but I mean, it all boils down to that, right? At the very least, on our side, as long as that cat is super buff, he's able to survive and continue to perpetuate his species, or as long as that dog, his disability works in his favor, he's able to continue. But on their side, they introduce arbitrary mechanisms of selecting which animals get to live. Insofar as we don't enshrine discrimination, insofar as we believe everything has an equal right to live and whatnot, I think their side cannot guarantee the ability for all animals to be safe equally, and because of that, their case is simply immoral. Vote for side proposition. Thank you.
Thank you, government. Calling for Orbit. Okay.
Am I audible?
Yep, yes, yes.
Right, give me a minute. Starting my speech. Oh wait. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, I think from the very get-go, both sides have defined that immorality is when one party harms the other. I think the biggest problem coming from opposition is that we're opposition. Coming from Gulf is that the harms that are defined by side government is that it harms the natural order. It is a form of slavery, and it takes and it stifles evolution. But I don't see how animals can feel the burden of having their natural order disrupted. I don't understand how they are able to rationalize that animals are able to feel the burden of being generationally trapped when they're living comfortably eating food. I don't think that the animals can feel the burden of being commodified when all they're doing is just existing, eating, and being with humans. All right. So sides opposition entire harms is contingent on the fact that animals can feel these harms that they propagated, and that we talk about how, and we argued that the problem with the choice of freedom is that it's very hypocritical because uh they define the lack of autonomy as a lack of choice, right? Therefore, won't you be in the wild, be forced to survive, not won't you have no choice to be happy in the wild? And in domestication, we just take away that choice. We give them the choice to not be they have no choice but to be happy, right? So on both sides has no freedom of choice. It's just purely circumstance. Animals are forced to survive in the wild, and animals are forced to be happy in domestication. And we believe that at least that happiness is more approximate on the outside because they can feel that. Animals don't feel do not feel the freedom in the wild. They feel having to survive day to day, finding food, have to survive, dodge predators and everything, dodge humans and everything. So we believe that happiness is more approximate to our side because they cannot feel the freedom of choice. At least they can feel the happiness in domestication. And they keep talking about the idea of natural order. I don't see why this is important. I don't see why animals can feel that the natural order is being disrupted. We're not disrupting the ecosystem. Wild cows can still exist. And if the natural order is for animals to adapt, then they would just adapt to being domesticated in our world. And their natural order, and they give a very narrow definition of what this conducive environment would look like in the world. They talk about how these animals are free to frolic and everything, find food, interact with other animals. When what also looks like is that they will die more painfully. Hunters will not hit in the head all the time. They will bleed out after being bitten, and they are also susceptible to being hunting to extinction. We can bring up the idea that one of the most poorly domesticated animals, fishing, right? The result of not being able to properly fish in the wild is the result of overfishing. And that because these animals are so hard to domesticate, is that why we have this issue now where certain fish are endangered in certain areas of the ocean. And we talk about how, and they keep talking about how animals are like they are imprisoned, and that they are like
POI.
have all their rights taken away. But we talk about how in status quo that humans have like the best interests at heart when it comes to the domestication and domesticating animals. We talk about how humans, they are researching in painless death. They are giving the animals home. It's mutual benefit. It's a mutual transaction happening on both sides. They research in premium food, healthcare, and then the result of commodification in this kind of things is like human empathy and mutual benefit. And I believe that the mutual benefit is more proximate because the animals can feel that transaction happening while we give them happiness. They give us, we give them food, they give back us companionship. That is a very real thing that they can rationalize in their mind. Yes, I'll take a POI.
Would you enslave a human if he consented to it?
The problem with that POI is that we're not enslaving a human, we are enslaving an animal. An animal, okay. And the problem with this is that the animals, you already talk about how their natural instinct is to survive. And at that point, that's their only focus. They're not thinking about their freedom, they're thinking about how to survive. And if the better transaction exists from domestication, then it's more likely that they would be okay with domestication in that sense. Right. So, and you keep talking about this like principle of freedom when animals themselves cannot rationalize that idea. So I don't see how animals would be happier under your side with more freedom. But at least on the outside, we at least can give like companionship, food, and free healthcare for them. No, they don't really pay for anything. So I would like to weigh out like the harm presented by side government is that the harms that exist under side government, while in their best case, that is true that the natural order may be disrupted, that these animals have no freedom, we believe that these harms exist under their side, but it's not felt by the animals. While on the outside, they argue for at least on the outside, even if they do spend generations trapped in like a house, I have like 11 cats, right? At least at the very end, they are able to feel that happiness, the companionship, that being able to comfortable. They do not feel that I just took their mom here and they give birth to a litter of kittens. They do not feel that I just taken their mom away from like the wild, right? They feel that they are born into a world of comfort. They are born into a world of like where humans take care of them, and they enjoy that. They do not feel the burden of being enslaved. They do not feel the burden of having their autonomy taken away. Even if we take them at their best case, that the autonomy is taken away, we already argued that it's a bit hypocritical that they argued that the lack of choice is a lack of autonomy, because in the wild you're also like forced to survive. So we believe that animals have no freedom of choice in the end of this debate. So I believe that under side opposition, we are able to bring to the table the idea that at least on the outside there exists humans incentive to like improve the life of the animals for mutual benefit, like healthcare and everything, and that the idea that domestication, that some people domesticate animals for their own happiness, is okay. That we don't care if like humans like take a cat out of the street because they like it. If the animal is happy, they are comfortable with it, it's mutual, right? We're not like putting chains on animals. They can still like, display when they are not happy with their current environment, and they're still like animal rights support group that like take care of like this abusive situations. Even on the outside, animals are able to comprehend their happiness more compared to side government, where somehow animals suddenly understand that they have rights. Suddenly, these animals have their freedom taken away, that their ancestors were living freely. So I don't believe that. I believe that side opposition is giving a more realistic approach to this motion. So with that, I would like to end my speech. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming from Africa.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Throughout this debate, there's only one thing that I can agree on with side proposition, and that is yes, Singapore did steal Taylor from us. So, about this debate, right? So, what are the few things that were brought up in this debate, right? So, we talked about is domestication good, which is what the debate is about, the natural order, the idea of survival, and like proposition brought up slavery or something like that, which I think is quite a bizarre idea on their side of the house. So they propagated this question to us: if safety is so important, then are we going to save every single animal in existence? Well, sure, we tell you that human beings are doing that right now. We tell you that there are hutan simpan, what's that? Reserve forests everywhere around the world. We tell you that there are heritages and that there are things being put into action to actually save. Yes, we do want to save these animals, especially if these animals are being threatened, especially if these animals are being threatened by extinction, being threatened. We can actively see that their populations are dwindling. Human beings are actively trying to save, and we are trying to protect every single one of these animals. And we tell you that this protection, we told you before that this protection only exists because of domestication. Because of domestication, that is why human beings care about animals, and that is why we do not see them as an enemy, and that's why fish are friends, not food. And so that's why we believe that under our world, where domestication does exist and where we accept domestication in its true form, its domesticated form, which is just a mutual relationship between between animals, we tell you that there is that without domestication, you create a world where, okay, say that suddenly on their side, they said they wanted to argue that they do have farms on their side. So we tell you that the farm would be more likely to be brutal, and we are more likely to just kill these animals without considering their mental well-being or mental or whatever mental health, psychology or whatever, if they feel pain or not, because we don't care about these animals. We just see them as food. We don't see them as the cute man's best friend or anything like that. We don't see sheep as these little cute animals, because this domestication is what allows humans to care about these animals. It encourages the human race to actually see these animals as something as like what they said, as higher than slaves, as higher than just an animal. They are a friend. They are something important to us. We tell you that this is what domestication does on our side of the house, and there is no counter coming from them. And so we tell you that the reason is that because of this, also we create these organizations, the organizations that instill safety, the organizations that care about animals. And we tell you that if we wanted to go so bad with this natural order, right? We tell you that if you wanted to go with natural order, then think animals like pandas would be dead. There are so many animals right now that would be dead. And hell, you know what's not natural? This Zoom meeting. This is not natural. So we tell you that the idea of the natural order is not as important as actually maintaining these ecosystems and maintaining the existence of these animals in the very first place and the well-being of this animal. And we tell you that there was no proper engagement or proper takedown to our idea of survival, and the idea that these animals want to survive and these animals want to live. And if they think that their survival is best in the hands of this weird large cat with no fur, then that's when, in the moment when they are actually exercising their authority to survive, they actually do in a little animal way. They are consenting because that is their goal. Their ultimate goal is always to survive at the very end of the day, whether they're in the wild or whether they're at home. They just want to live. So that's why we tell you that on that clash we win. And again, I did not time myself. Oh my god, it's the morning. I'm so sorry, everybody. So we tell you that. Oh my god, seriously? Okay, well, let's just think about it. Would you rather be a cat dying in the wild, or would you rather be Taylor Swift's cat? With that, I thank you.
Thank you, off reply, calling it from gov reply.
Hi, am I audible?
Yeah, clear.
All right. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Having to live under circumstances where you are basically a prisoner to your owner, subjugated to their every needs and wants, it's not a life to live. It's not a life you want to live. It's not a life animals want to live, right? A few strategic observations at the top of this speech. This debate is about the morality of the choice, right? It's a principled debate, and it's not contingent on the practical outcomes, right? We ought to prioritize the principles and the morality. And survival is not a principled argument. It literally hinges on practical outcomes. It's unclear what they're thinking, right? I think if they want to hinge their whole case on the benefits that these owners want to give give to these animals, I think all we have to prove to win is that most of the time this is not the case, right? I think also note that there's a tension in their case because it's unclear why these domesticated animals can feel happiness but not sadness. Like suddenly they can feel happiness when their owners treat them well, but they can't feel sadness when their owners don't. Like it's time for them to stop bringing up convenient examples, right? So what did we tell you in this debate? We brought to you the moral framework. We gave you 4 structural reasons that were barely engaged with. We brought to you the ability to consent. We told you that animals had no capacity to fight back, and oftentimes they lacked any other alternative. Secondly, animals had no autonomy because they cannot live based on their free will, because they had to follow every needs and wants of the humans. They can't go out to interact with the other cats and dogs. Their autonomy is restricted. When they can't roam free in the grass, their autonomy is restricted, right? I think animals can clearly feel if they aren't able to do what they want to do. I think thirdly, we brought to you the commodification of living animals, and oftentimes the breeding process to meet demands of consumers is already inherently immoral because you force them to breed and you keep them in inhumane conditions. And lastly, my second brought to you the exploitation of the innate survival instincts of these animals and how you hardwire their brain and you take advantage of how their brain works, right? And we barely got any response to, right? So next class is on the safety and treatment of animals. And this is where Ott engages the most, right? If this is where they want to talk most about, let's engage with them on this, right? So we told you from first, absent of domestication, these animals would already develop their own coping and survival mechanisms, and this is just part of the natural order, right? Because this would have developed over time. We told you animals didn't need to be trimmed. It's the fact that when humans interfere and started trimming them, then you make them more dependent on us instead, right? This debate had to operate in a world where domestication never occurred in the first place, right? We also told you in second why it's unclear that the safety of sheep and dogs and like other domesticated animals had to be prioritized over the survival of other predators, right? They still never provided this throughout the whole debate, right? I think that secondly, their response to our POI was so wishy-washy, right? Because if they cared so much about the safety of animals, we asked them why didn't they intervene in every single circumstance where a lion kills a zebra in the wild, for example. And if you don't intervene, who are you to choose which animal deserves to live or not, right? I think the answer we got then in reply was too late, but it was still a high burden regardless, right? Wanting to save every single animal in the world is simply just unrealistic, and it's simply a ridiculous burden for them to take, right? I think the worst case on our side of the debate is that the treatment is equal on your side, i.e. there's the same number of animals being treated good and bad on your side, because for every animal that is treated well, there is also one abuse. So it's time to stop cherry picking examples. So then we told you we ought to prioritize our principle that we got no response to, right? The fact that you are denying them their autonomy and violating their consent is why you should never bring them out of their natural order, regardless of any outcomes that might occur, right? We told you the weighing here was simple. Safety was never guaranteed. Autonomy was. You can never control the incentives and actions of every single human, right? Whether they take care of the domesticated animal in a good manner or whether they abuse the animal until the animal is gonna die, right? You can never control every single incentive of every single actor in the whole world. But what we could control, what we could guarantee these animals was autonomy, right? The right to choose what to do, right? The right to run away from prey or the right to just run into battle, right? All of these were choices that we uniquely allowed these animals to have, right? I think all of this was a net good on our side that they still never engaged with, right? So why should you give us the ballot, right? Because safety was never guaranteed, right? Autonomy was, right? So for all those reasons, proud to propose.